It is 7 o'clock, so I ask everyone to stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance
liberty and justice for all.
Mr. Stock is not able to attend this evening, but all other members are present. So I will turn it over to Dr. Hicks for the updated 2017-18 budget.
Thank you, Mrs. Klaas. Just very quickly, this is our first meeting after the performance of our high school musical, and we always recognize our kids. We hope you were able to go and see the show. It was Phantom of the Opera this year, and it was absolutely fantastic. Congratulations, Mrs. Wild, to your son. Congratulations, Mr. DeBanco. Okay, so that's good news. But this isn't bad news, but it's not good news yet either. We're going to go through an update on the New York State budget process and where things stand. We are likely in the last week of the New York State process. In order for the budget to be on time, it has to be completed by April 1st. Since that falls on a weekend, normally they would give the legislators a little leeway until next Monday, but we're hoping that we find out all of the details on where the New York State budget is this coming weekend. We can give you what we know so far. We have another update on the 2017-18 Clarence budget. The tax levy cap number and the tax levy rate is complete at this point and finalized, and we want to review those things with everybody. And this is traditionally the budget session where we review the 5-year projections as well. So we'll start with where things are for New York State. The governor, by law, has to put his budget out by the end of January. We've been working on the prospect of the governor's budget. About 2 or 3 weeks ago, the Assembly and the Senate also put out their versions of the budget, and this is how things stack up. As far as the overall increase to education, the governor was a little under $1 billion. The Assembly is at $1.8 billion, and the Senate is at $1.2 billion. So it's probably going to be someplace between where the governor is and where the Assembly is. The key number for Clarence is foundation aid, and that's the aid that is unrestricted that we get that helps us balance our books. The governor had $428 million of foundation aid in his budget. That yielded about $170,000 towards Clarence for a year-over-year increase in foundation aid. The Assembly has a $1.4 billion foundation aid increase this year, and the Senate has a little under $1 billion foundation aid increase. So it points to the fact that when the budget negotiations are finally complete, we will probably get more than what we have right now. Perhaps not enough to close our gap, but more than what we have right now. As far as the foundation aid formula, the governor repealed or wanted to repeal the foundation aid formula. He wanted to freeze data for aid at this year's levels. That would have been a bad thing for Clarence and most other school districts across the state. The Assembly and the House both reject the repeal of the foundation aid formula. The Assembly would like to keep it the way it is. The Senate funds it with new tiers but rejects the governor's proposal. As far as charter schools go, the governor wanted to increase charter school reimbursements by $22 million and lift the cap on charter schools. The Assembly wants to freeze charter school tuition, and it denies the increasing of the cap, and the Senate would increase by $150 per pupil and eliminate the cap on charter schools. We have a handful of students who attend charter schools from our district. Rick, maybe 2 or 3 kids? Two kids. So for us, it's not that big a deal, but for other districts, it is a big deal. The good news is expense-driven aids, which are special education, transportation, BOCES, they are all fully funded in the governor and the Assembly and the Senate version of the bill. As far as English language learners, the governor did not propose any additional dollars for English language learners. The Assembly and the Senate both propose above and beyond foundation aid dollar increases for English language learners. Our English language learner population has increased, but the amount of money that we might get from this type of a proposal would be very small. Other things, the governor wanted to unilaterally change the budget process so that he alone could change allocations at mid-year without the approval of the Assembly and the Senate. That would be rather undemocratic, but it's a power move by the governor. That is rejected by both the Assembly and the Senate. The governor also put in $24 million in his budget for extended day programs. The Assembly has no money for extended day programs. The Senate agreed with the governor. The governor had $50 million for brand new programs. The Assembly has no additional dollars. It puts all that money towards foundation aid. And the Senate has a $300 million proposal for education tax credits that would mostly help private schools, where donations to private schools and other entities, one entity that could get helped by that is the Clarence Schools Enrichment Foundation. But somehow the Senate would keep track of $300 million of dollars that would be allocated for education tax credits. That would definitely take money away from public schools. Some other things for the budget, for community schools, which we don't qualify for in Clarence, the governor had a $100 million increase. The Assembly has a $150 million increase. The Senate has a $125 million increase. So community schools, which puts social service agencies together with schools in the same building, that will be funded, but I think there's only 2 districts in Erie County that are eligible. For universal pre-kindergarten, the governor put in an additional $5 million to expand it. The Assembly puts in $50 million to expand it, and the Senate rejects expansion of universal pre-K. As far as teacher centers, the governor would eliminate funding for teacher centers. The Senate accepts the governor's proposal. The Assembly would not increase funding, but would keep it at the same level of $14 million. And Clarence participates in a collaborative of teacher centers with how many, Kristen?
3.
3 other school districts. As far as STAR, which is a big item, the governor was going to cap STAR at the 2016-17 amounts and change the way STAR would be reimbursed. The Assembly and the Senate have rejected that, and they would like to go back to the old way of reimbursing STAR and having STAR increase from year to year. The property tax cap had no change in the governor's proposal. For the Assembly, they would make the tax cap permanent and apply it to New York City, where it currently does not apply. For the Senate, they would change the cap to include an exclusion for payments in lieu of taxes and also for BOCES capital expenses. That would help us as far as an exclusion to the cap because we pay into both those things. As far as money for non-public schools, the governor increased aid by 3.9% to non-public schools, plus an additional $25 million for non-public schools technology use. The Assembly had no change for reimbursements to non-public schools. The Senate has $34 million to increase security in non-public schools, $25 million for science, technology, engineering, and math programs, and another 7.7 for immunizations. So the Senate puts a large number in addition to the governor for non-public schools. My Brother's Keepers program for young African-American men to keep them in school. Clarence doesn't qualify, but the governor had $18 million. The Assembly would accept the governor's proposal and increase it by $1.2 million. The Senate rejects funding for My Brother's Keeper. So that's where things stand. And now we're 3 men in a room, the governor, the Senate Majority Leader, and the Speaker of the Assembly, and they will battle each other for the next couple of days, and hopefully we'll find something out this weekend on where the program is. What's really important is for us to have a budget run, a listing of how much aid each school district would get by next week. We absolutely have to have it by April 17th, the next time the board meets, or we'll have to guesstimate at that point. So that's where the state budget stands. As far as where does the Clarence budget stand, it's pretty much in the same place when we met with you in February and provided you with an update. Here are some assumptions for program. We had two goals coming into the 17-18 budget season: no reductions in staff and maintain or improve all existing programs. Well, there are no improvements to programs. There's no additions in this particular budget, but there's no reductions either. So we were able to meet those goals. Secondly, the capped tax levy alone will not provide enough funds to maintain our existing programs year over year. We knew that, so that makes us a little bit more dependent on the state. So we're hopeful that the state will come through this next week. The governor's budget does not provide enough state aid to balance our budget at this point in time. Now, luckily, both the Assembly and the Senate are allocating larger dollars. And when it's all said and done, hopefully we will get enough to balance our budget. If we don't, then we will use reserves or fund balance to fund our rollover budget. One thing we won't do is exceed the tax property cap. We are closely monitoring special education and English language learner needs. Those are the areas where, just based on programmatic recommendations that happen at the Committee on Special Education or that happen with English language learner kids, we may have to add staff members depending upon how things turn out at the end of this particular school year. Okay, some assumptions on the revenue side for our 2017-18 budget. We're building in a sales tax increase of 2%. That was incorrect on the board members' packet. We had it at 3, it's 2%. Our local revenues, which are payments in lieu of taxes, interest rates, miscellaneous resources, will remain flat. Our appropriated fund balance and our appropriated reserves are likely to increase. This year, our appropriated fund balance is $1.2 million. In the past, it's been as high as $5 to $7 million. It'll probably end up at about $1.6 million when all is said and done, when we get the final numbers from the state. The tax levy cap is exactly 1.74%. So the tax levy will generate approximately $790,000 in revenue for us this year. Our budget to budget is about $2 million, so you can see what we need to make up in state aid. New York state aid will be determined in the final budget. We were anticipating that it would increase by 3%. It's nowhere near that right now. It'll probably be closer to 3% by the time the Senate, the Assembly, and the governor all agree. We're more dependent on state aid, but less likely to receive it this particular school year. And then finally, the potential for a reduction in federal aid is high. And this is something we definitely will not know by the time the board approves the budget. We don't show you the federal aid in the budget because it's really not it's a grant source, but it does pay for some staffing in our district. There are basically two chunks of federal aid that we get. Pretty close to $1 million for special education services. That's called IDEA aid. And about $250,000 for what's called Title I, or high poverty aid, along with staff development money. There's a pretty good chance that those funds will be cut by at least a quarter, by at least 25%. We won't know exactly until the federal budget is complete and the Federal Department of Education makes those decisions. But that's something that's looming on the horizon that we'll have to deal with throughout the year depending upon what happens. Okay, our expense assumptions. Our wages are up about 3% overall, and that takes into account the 6 retirements that we had. Our salaries and benefits comprise about 75% of our overall spending. Our retirement systems are down. Our cost for the retirement system is down again this year. This is the 3rd year in a row it's gone down. It's down by about $100,000 a year. Special education costs are up about 2% year over year. Our debt service is costed out as per our schedule. We receive state aid to pay on our debt along with the local share. Our healthcare expenses are up by 5%, and all of our employee groups are contributing more this year towards healthcare. All other costs are up about 1% in our budget. Some of these same assumptions will follow through for our 5-year plan. So, where are we with the draft of our budget? Well, we're really exactly where we were when we showed it to you in February. This year's budget is $78.1 million. We'll be able to raise $790,000 through our tax levy increase at the cap level. about $572,000 through other revenue sources. That leaves us $733,000 short. We're going to need that type of an increase from the state, or we'll have to backfill it with fund balance and reserves. Our total budget for next year, $80.2 million. So if we get additional state aid, we're going to use it to lower the dollars from reserves and fund balance. If we got an extremely large increase, we could consider enhancing programs, but that is unlikely to occur. We're likely to be short on what we need to balance the budget from the state. We're definitely short right now. Okay, so where does that leave levy and rate for 2017-18? So remember, the tax levy is the amount of money that we have to raise once all other revenue sources have been subtracted from the budget. And it's next year, it's capped at 1.74%. We will be right at that cap level. The tax rate is the dollar per thousand once the levy is divided across the total assessed value of the towns that make up the Clarence School District, the biggest of which is the town of Clarence. So we are estimating right now a $14.76 per thousand increase. That is likely to change. The estimate will be different when it's actually set in August. We don't set the tax rate. We set the tax levy now. We set the tax rate in August when we have a full accounting of all of the total valuations for the towns that make up Clarence. So right now, we're estimating that the value of the town, of all the assessed property, will go up a little bit. We've built a little bit of that in, but this is likely to be smaller when we hit the actual number. So at $14.67 per thousand, what is it on average houses in the district? Well, if you have a $100,000 house, the year-over-year property tax increase would be $14. If you have a $200,000 house, it would be $28. If you have a $300,000 house, it would be $42. So this is the lowest year-over-year tax increase in the past 6 years. And it's likely to be even lower once the rate is set. Maybe even half of what you see up there. Okay, for the last 4 or 5 years, we've been doing 5-year projections and showing everybody where we think things are going to be. This is our 5-year projection for revenues. And the assumptions that make up this projection is that our sales tax will raise approximately, should that be 2%, Rick, or did I mess that up? So there's a typo there. It should raise approximately 2% annually. Our local revenues are anticipated to remain flat. We have built into these projections about a 3% tax levy increase. That's what it's been on average for the 6 years of the capped levy. This year it's lower. If it doesn't reach to that level, then we'll need more state aid. Our fund balance will definitely increase. Our appropriated fund balance will increase in 2017-18. We need to watch out for the year 2022. That's when nearly $1 million of debt is retired, and we may need to dip into some fund balances again there to balance the budget. Our state aid is anticipated on historical increases in the current political environment. So less than what we think is going to actually happen, but more than what is there this year. Okay? So based on those assumptions, you can see we go up about $2 million to $2.3 million every year for the next 5 years on the revenue side. On the expense side, same kind of thing. The expense and revenue budgets must balance. So our wages, about 3% annually, and we've projected some retirements that we've built in there. Not as many retirements as we normally put in, because we haven't been getting those kind of retirements in the past 3 or 4 years, but we've built some in. Our benefits are anticipated to rise about 4% annually, the biggest of which is health care, which is about a 5% increase. And if we can keep it at that, we feel like we're doing better than the community average. Contractual items and supplies, about a 2% increase. BOCES and special ed, about a 3% increase. And our debt service will increase due to the bonding of our brand new capital project for 18-19, but then it will level off due to the amount of money that we get every year from in-state aid. So We are required by law to show you the budget in 3 parts. We really don't need to do this until April, but as long as it's ready, we figured we would do it right now. So the first part of the budget is administrative. And between district office, curriculum and supervision, liability and property insurance and benefits, you can see the year-over-year change for administration in the budget is about $280,000. Second is the capital budget, which includes operation and maintenance, debt service, benefits for people that work within those areas. That's about a $280,000 increase as well. Third part of the budget is program or instructional, regular education, special education, transportation, and benefits. You can see the increase is about $1.5 million for that area of the budget. So the percentages, the administrative percentage of the budget is about the same. It's going to be exactly the same as it was last year. So is the capital and the program portion of the budget. They really haven't changed. In addition to a resolution to vote on the budget, we will have a resolution for purchasing 9 new buses. It will be a separate resolution that the community will vote on, is it May 16th, Rick, or 17th? May 16th. So $825,000 will buy us 9 buses, 5 big ones, 2 wheelchair vans, and 2 30-passenger buses. And it will keep us on track for our 10 to 12-year replacement cycle. The impact of the bus purchase on the tax cap is neutral, is nothing. It's about $4 per year on an average house for the life of the loan, which is 5 years of the bus resolution. So, we held our first budget meeting on January 30th, our second budget meeting on the 27th of February, our third budget meeting today. We've also talked about budget at our February and March regular board meetings. April 17th is the date where the Board of Ed will adopt the budget. Whether we have anything from the state or not, that's the date we have to guess what's going to happen and adopt the budget. Hopefully we'll have a state aid run by that point and the New York State budget will be done. On May 8th, we have, by law, a public budget hearing. Everything is already decided and the community will know everything, but that's what we need to do at that particular meeting. And then on May 16th, in the gymnasium of the high school, we have the public budget vote. We open at 7 a.m. and we close at 9 p.m. So that's a quick overview for the board on where we stand as of March. Any board questions?
Kindergarten roundup, the numbers change for after having
So
them
far
come
our
in?
numbers are holding pretty true to form. We've only had 1 building that's completed its kindergarten roundup, so we need to get through the other 3 to give you the definitive kindergarten number for next year.
Okay.
So we'll probably formalize the placement of kindergarten teachers someplace in early August, okay?
But you'll know the numbers.
But we'll know the numbers by the time
Next
you,
month.
probably by the time you vote
Next
on
month.
April 17th. Any other board questions?
Just procedurally, a quick question. We know we're gonna have a gap that we're gonna have to fill with fund balance. We don't know how large it will be. Do we formally decide when we adopt the budget on April 17th, where it comes from, or is that something we do subsequent?
Go ahead, Rick.
You could do that subsequent. What you're really going to decide on April 17th is the total budget and that the levy does not exceed the tax cap. And then in August is really when the final decision is going to be made, where if we know we're getting $500,000 in state aid and we only want to use $200,000 in reserves, then we would do it at that time. Also in August, everything gets sharpened up, and as long as the levy doesn't exceed the tax cap, then you've done what you're supposed to do.
So really your vote is on the spending plan, and we figure out the revenue things a little bit later when it tightens up. Any other board questions? Any community questions on the budget that we can answer? Okay. That concludes the report, Mrs. Claus.
So we'll move to the public input, so I'll give you one last chance. If anyone has any questions, they can go to the mic, give name and address, in case we need to follow up with you. Anybody has any questions on the budget? Clarification? Okay. Then we need a motion to move to executive session to, for discussion of confidential matters regarding a student.
I'll make a motion.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor? Okay, thank you very much.